Today is a good day because we're making this decadent Filipino-style chicken adobo along with the best garlic rice you've ever had and of course a little Filipino-style eggplant salad so you can feel a little bit better about yourself. I got you. But I would also like to clear up a little bit of a misconception about the Philippines and their food. I visited the country a few months back and as most tourists do, I went there for the picturesque views and the perfect beaches. Which is kind of unusual for me because normally I travel for food first and then everything else just falls in line. But when it comes to the Philippines, all I heard is that the food is pretty sugar and fast food heavy, so I did not expect very much. And after I visited a Jollibee, the #1 homegrown fast food chain of the Philippines, with their famous chicken joy and spaghetti, I was like, yep, I'm sorry Filipino friends, but I am not sure if those ketchup noodles should really be legal, so I do not recommend those. But then something interesting happened. I went on an island hopping day trip, and it's customary to start that off with a food haul at a wet market where you can buy anything you like and a local chef will come along and cook it for you on the trip. That is actually where you can get a glimpse at more traditional Filipino food, and that's a completely different story. The Philippines are comprised of over 7,000 islands, so it might not come as a huge surprise that fish and seafood is a staple here. But then look at what type of fish and seafood, like what even is this thing? Not to mention the abundance of fresh veggies, of course. And so the cook on our island hopping trip did a fantastic job of cooking some really wholesome and delicious Filipino food for us. And more importantly, that food had nothing to do with the fast food ridden food courts and malls and bigger cities like Manila. Needless to say, that completely turned around my understanding of and view on Filipino cuisine, which I think deserves way more credit. And so here I am making a video about Filipino food for you guys, but it actually turns out that it's not so easy to pick a dish to introduce. Because if I told you to go out and buy malunggay, cassava, and that LSD fish from before, chances are you won't, but fortunately, there's a super traditional cooking technique in the Philippines which is not only easy to replicate all over the world, no, it also happens to be one of the tastiest flavor profiles I've come across in a long time. I am talking about Filipino chicken adobo. First of all, this doesn't have to be chicken. Any protein will work. Pork, shrimp, tofu, there are no limits. And secondly, if you just thought of like the Spanish-Mexican adobo, you are mostly wrong, but also a little bit right. The Spanish word itself originally referred to preserving meat in a vinegar and paprika marinade. When the Spaniards then colonized the Philippines like 500 years ago, they would encounter a very popular cooking technique where people would braise food in vinegar. And of course, they were like, sí, esto es adobo. And so aside from maybe using vinegar in a marinade, a Filipino adobo and a Mexican or Spanish adobo really have nothing to do with each other. But history has already taken its course, and so adobo is the name we're stuck with. But now let's actually make a real Filipino adobo. I start with chicken thighs and drumsticks, which I'm gonna bravely score so we can maximize the surface area exposed to our marinade. You can use chicken breast too, but that's very easy to overcook, while dark chicken meat is virtually indestructible. Now let's start working on our actual adobo marinade. I'm gonna be using a few ingredients in there that are not super authentic in an adobo, but they are very common in the Philippines, and I really think they help elevate this adobo to a whole new level. So the first one will be some citrus juice. In the Philippines, with almost every single meal, you get a few calamansi on the side. Calamansi is a very small citrus fruit that is native to the Philippines, and I know it kind of looks like a lime, but it tastes pretty different. So if you can find calamansi wherever you live, good for you, but for everybody else, I'm just gonna recommend mixing a lime and a tangerine. That'll get you somewhat close. Next up, we're adding equal parts soy sauce and white rice vinegar. These are our base flavors. Another touch of dark soy sauce will help you get that rich color. And then finally, we're going in with a whole bunch of crushed garlic cloves, way more black pepper than you ever thought could taste good, a few bay leaves, and crushed ginger. Another addition that might not be super traditional but really, really tasty is lemongrass. Crush that and add that too. Finally, mix your ingredients together and let that marinate for at least 30 minutes, but you can totally even do that the day before or something. And so while that's marinating, let's work on some classic Filipino garlic rice. I know it sounds simple, and it actually is, but do not underestimate the power of the garlic rice. It might very well be one of the tastiest things you'll ever cook. The whole trick is actually just to fry a whole head or two of minced garlic in some neutral oil. Do it low and slow because that stuff browns and burns quickly. So have some patience and stir at least every minute. When the garlic has turned a light golden color, strain and dry it on a paper towel. That garlic will smell and taste amazing, but so will the oil that you've cooked it. So we're definitely keeping both of those, and they're gonna taste good on anything. Case in point, we're gonna add some of both the oil and the garlic along with a pinch of salt to some washed white rice, give everything a mix, and then cook the rice just as we normally would, except this one's gonna taste about 7,000 times better. This is hands down my favorite way to eat rice ever. In the meantime, let's say our chicken is done marinating. So get out as much as you want to cook, pat it really dry, and brown it from both sides in some coconut oil, lard, or canola oil inside something like a Dutch oven. A little bit of browning will do, don't stress out over this step. You want to deglaze that with a little bit of water first and then add all of the remaining marinade. You can top that up with more water if needed until your chicken is mostly submerged, and then we'll briefly bring everything to a boil, cover and simmer for 40 minutes, flipping the chicken halfway through. You can actually perfectly use that time you have on your hands now to make this smoky yet fresh Filipino eggplant salad called ensalada talong. I don't know, my Tagalog pronunciation is probably offensive, I'm sorry. This one really couldn't be much simpler. Just score an eggplant lengthwise 4 or 5 times and then drop it into a preheated oven for 20 to 25 minutes. The skin should be very easy to peel and come right off like this. And if you do a lot of Asian cooking, you will probably have guessed that ideally you'll do this with one of those Asian eggplants, you know, the slim, light purple colored one. But you know, the kitchen has no boundaries. Next, you want to finely dice a tomato, a red onion, and optionally something green, like a pepper. And then we slice the eggplant lengthwise because it's quite thick. And then we simply smash and flatten it with a fork, turning it into a perfect sauce and flavor vehicle. We're gonna top this with our fresh veggies and of course a very simple sauce consisting of just vinegar, garlic, chili, and a little bit of soy sauce and black pepper. This dish, you guys, will easily rank among my favorite salads of all time. It's so fresh and yet the eggplant makes it so rich at the same time. Speaking of which, you can even do the old Craig and egg. Drench your smashed eggplant in the egg mix and then fry up the legendary tortang talong. Oh my god. A very cool eggplant omelette technique brought to you by the people of the Philippines. Very tasty indeed. But let's get back to our chicken, which by now should be done braising, which means that you can enjoy the sight and smell of a super flavorful and also deliciously tender chicken. At this point, you can get some or all of the stuff in the braising liquid out. I actually like keeping the peppercorns and bay leaves in. And then we aggressively reduce this. You can go as long as you want, but you probably know the drill. Just keep reducing until it looks more like a syrup than a watery solution. That's when it's gonna be good. So grab a piece of chicken, smother it in our intensely flavorsome adobo sauce, and don't forget to garnish with spring onions so it doesn't look like a brown blob on Instagram. There's another really tasty Filipino recipe that didn't quite make this video, but I'm gonna post it on my Patreon page. So thank you so much to everyone who's supporting me over there, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next video.